when it comes to decision making, and I'm leaning on the work of a professor, Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics, on the premise that he figured out that our decisions are not made by logic and reason, which is what old economics thought. His model is that our brain has two parts, system one, system two. System one is fast. It's an unconscious process that works outside of our conscious control. On the other side, we have system two. System two is our logical part of the brain. Here lies the problem, right? I'm writing my book. How am I going to convince them that they should do that? And that's basically what the principles of persuasion are. They are decision triggers.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody, so here's a question that probably keeps you up at night. Why do some people seem to effortlessly get others to say yes while you're still struggling to get your emails answered? Here's another question. What if I told you that there's actual science behind influence, proven research that explains why people make the decisions they do, and most professionals have no idea it exists? Well, my guest today is Patrick van der Burgt, a certified trainer business partner to Dr. Robert Cialdini, who has sold over 7 million copies of his book, Here How to Say Yes More Often. And Patrick has trained leading enterprises worldwide. Today, he is here to share some of the secrets that separate people who get heard from people who get ignored. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking all about his book, How to Hear Yes More Often, and everything in between. So, Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Daniela. I'm excited to be here. With my field, I remember me learning it for the first time and realizing, how easy it really is to bring the right pieces of information to the surface to motivate people into action. And yeah, it was a big eye-opening event. So it'd be lovely if people have a look at our book as well. But if today I can achieve those eyes, or those in this case, the ears, getting a little bit bigger in terms of what we're sharing today, then I think we've had a good episode.
Hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around, because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is a topic that relates to everybody. Everybody, from one capacity or another, whatever, no matter what your profession might be, persuasion is important, regardless of what we might be trying to achieve. So it's important that we do it ethically and correctly. But before we talk about the contents of the book, I'm curious to know a little bit more about, the title itself, like how to hear yes more often, not how to get people to say yes, right? So can you explain that philosophy? Like why frame it in that regard?
Sure. So when it comes to persuasion science, we need to realize that there's a science to how people make decisions. And what most people, most people in general, but especially business people, where it has a big impact on the trajectory of their business and their lives, what they don't know is that there is this science that you can use to motivate behavior. And so if we raise the right pieces of information to the surface, instead of getting a small amount of yeses, and when we say yeses, yeses could be sales related, as in somebody says, yes, I want to buy your product service or buy into your idea. But it can also be yes in terms of, I will take your recommendation, or yes, I will do what you're recommending in your book that I should do. Let's say exercises that you're recommending people to do, or reading on to the next chapter, or buying your book, or getting your management team to follow your vision and buy into that, even if you've made mistakes in the past, right? That's all behavior. So we can all get yeses and inaction on that. So in a lot of scenarios, whenever we make a pitch to someone, whenever we make a proposal or request, we have a certain amount of yeses and a certain amount of no's, or people not cooperating, not doing what we asked.
Mhm.
And what is clear is that a lot of those inactions or a lot of those no's are not actually no's, they're indecision. We're actually making it more complicated. We're causing more uncertainty in our audience, and they decide not to make a decision. And so those moments of indecision, they could have been yes. So that's where that title fits in, as in hear yes more often, right? You hear yes a certain amount of time with the efforts that you're probably using now, but that could be a lot more. But on the other hand, certainly also this on it's not magic, right? It doesn't make everybody say yes, so it doesn't work all the time. So you certainly can't say, it's ethical, it's gentle, no lying, no cheating, but it's exceedingly powerful.
Understood. Yeah, and I mean that's clearly a huge thing throughout this book, the idea of being ethical, right? And we talked about that a little bit before. Um, so I love that you kind of brought that up because my next question to you is like, what is that line then between ethical persuasion and manipulation? How do we know when it crosses that line?
Yeah, great. And I'm glad for you to ask. So ethics is often not talked about when we learning communication or let's say sales training or training in advertising or marketing. So research shows that we can absolutely use persuasion science in an unethical way.
Hmm.
But research shows that that produces or potentially produces short-term results, but long-term disaster. Because if we manipulate people, if we make promises that we're not going to keep, or our arguments are based on lies, then our partner in our arrangement, in our discussions, is not going to find the benefit that they were promised. And that's going to backfire sooner or later. They're not going to return to a situation where they did not do well in the bargaining or in the arrangement. And also nowadays, especially now with social media, being found out for trying to manipulate or lie to people can have an immediate backlash. It can destroy a personal brand or a company brand in a day, really. And it can follow you around for a very, very long time. But there's no need to do that. Once we understand what the science actually teaches, we can use it ethically, and it is very powerful. And then we produce both short term and long term results. And it produces or it creates stronger, more loyal relationships. So it's got everything going for it. So we definitely want to use this in an ethical way.
Of course, understood. And that makes a lot of sense. And I'm really glad that you kind of define that line and draw that space because I think a lot of people might, go back and forth between that line when they're, coming up with their advertising plans or persuading others to, buy their service, their product, whatever it might be. But it's so important that we do it ethically and kind of like make that change, make that difference. Um,
Yeah. And I can elaborate a little bit more in terms of how do you figure out what's ethical or not. And there's entire university courses on ethics, right? So it's hard to wrap that up in a, in a 1 or 2 minute
that's true.
conversation. But we have a sort of a 3 question filter, and that's a reasonably good start. And it also helps us reflect on things that we might think of implementing, but also think that we are already implementing and see if it passes that filter. So the first question is, are you telling the truth? Right? Clearly, if you're lying, if you're making stuff up, then, well, that's not ethical. Second question is what you're bringing up in conversation, is it naturally there in the situation, not counterfeited or exaggerated in any way? So an example of that is you go into a store and you're considering purchasing something, and the salesperson says that it's the last one that they have. Right. And so based on that information, you weren't quite sure, but hey, it's the last one. I better buy it. Right. The last pair of shoes in that color, that size, or a TV, whatever it is. And so you purchase it. And so you walk out the door. And then 2, 3 hours later, you remember I don't know, got to buy a pair of extra shoelaces or extension cord, whatever it is you purchased. And you come back into the store and wow, there's another one, right? Another version of that product, same size, same color, all that sort of stuff. And now you confront the salesperson and say, hang on a second, you told me it was the last one. And he goes, yeah, well, it was the last one that we had in store, but we have a storeroom just across the street, and we have plenty of stock there. So, we got another one from there, right? So
Right.
technically, you might have told the truth, but effectively, you didn't, right? You did that to deceive. And so that's, of course, also not good. And then the third question is it wise to make
Mm.
this request, right? If the other party agrees to what it is we're suggesting, would they be happy with it? Would they come back to us in the future? And if the answer is yes to that, then good chances that it passes that filter. So those are some three quick questions that we can ask ourselves about procedures we're already using or thinking of using to see if they're ethical or not.
Understood. Yeah, no, thank you for those questions. I think that's something that perhaps everybody right now could even like pause the podcast, ask themselves those questions about their current practices and see like, what's my own stance? I'm curious to know, does your book have like a space in there where they ask those questions to themselves as well to kind of like audit where they're at before proceeding sort of thing?
No, we co-authored it with some other Cialdini certified trainers. So we
Understood.
each took a chapter, and of course, we're associated with Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote that book Influence, which sold 7 million copies, 48 different languages, and considered by many top CEOs to be the best business book of all time. And that really dives beautifully into the theory and a lot of the case studies of where all the stuff comes from. And it should be in anybody's library, really, even just as an audiobook. So we didn't want to, you know, basically try and replace or rehash what's in his book. So in our book, we sort of took it from the text. Okay, let's assume you've read Dr. Cialdini's book. And so you're getting a little bit of a grasp of persuasion science. Now, how do you put that into practice? So each of my co-authors took a chapter and we came from a different angle. So I tell a story about the first time I used persuasion science and how that got me out of a seemingly dire situation, and we ended up being market leader. One of my colleagues talks about it from a presentation perspective, right? When you're standing on stage, how do you use it there? John Dorbar talks about, a little bit from an introvert perspective, right? When you're not the person to sort of get out there and get in there first, how do you use persuasion science there? And then Martin John talks about it from a procurement perspective, as in we're always talking about influence and persuasion, typically from a sales angle. But what if you're the buyer? How do you use persuasion science then? So every chapter sort of brings a different angle.
Understood. Okay, I like that a lot. And that's so important too to get different perspectives from different people. That not only makes the book credible, but also offers the audience different resources and perspectives and ideas. So that's a great structure for sure. Um, so what was it like to create the book then, being that it was written by so many different people? Were you in communication throughout the writing process?
Yeah, relatively painless project. I was book leader, not that means so much, but basically trying to coordinate everybody to get their stuff in on time. So we just set a deadline. I think we set it 4 or 6 weeks into the future. Each of us had a chapter, so it doesn't take that long to write that. If you really buckle down, you could probably do that in a weekend. But yeah, most of us had that done in 2 3 weeks, and then of course rehash it. We asked our fellow authors to read each other's chapters just to get some input in terms of, does it read? Because often when you read it a few times and you might write it a little bit in your own tone of voice, it doesn't actually come across as well when somebody else reads it. So we got some constructive criticism from our colleagues. And yeah, then it went to the publisher who lined it all out nicely for us, and it got made ready. We had one of those competitions to get the cover created. That was interesting. So the challenge went out to graphic designers to make it, and then there was so much money up for grabs for the winning cover. So that produced a lot of different
That's
looks. It was
really
hard to imagine,
cool.
how many different visions people come up with for that title. But yeah, it was a relatively painless process doing it together as a group. Um, and of course, we were, with the foreword and that sort of stuff, making sure that that wasn't, aimed at any one particular person. It was sort of general. But yeah, it was a pretty easy process, and it's a good way for especially professionals to also get some more authority. I'd published another book already, um, But this is a nice way to, to have a book, leave it with people. It raises your authority, which is, of course, one of the principles of persuasion. It's a little bit, they say, the new business card. People throw out a business card, but they don't throw out a book.
Right, I do like that, right, you can't throw away a book, it's always gonna, like, hold stay there on the shelf, so I like that last point you made for sure. And it's always very interesting to work with other people, just to circle back to that. I mean, a lot of authors think writing is a solitary effort, but a lot of the times when you do combine minds the way you have, I mean, it just heightens the quality of the book and the overall message, so I like that a lot. To kind of transition back into the book itself, I mean, you have so many different principles, 7 of them, actually. So which one do you find people struggle with the most out of all of them? And I guess conversely, which one do you think people could put most importance on? The one that should be most consistent.
Yeah, sure. Shall we maybe? I'd,
Outline
I'd
the
love to
7?
run you through the principles.
Mhm.
Shall I touch on how human decisions are made? Because that would really tie in
Let's go
nicely
on.
with how
Let's
the
go for
principles
it.
actually.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Okay. All right, great. So when it comes to decision making, and I'm leaning on the work of a professor, Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics, but he's actually a professor in psychology, or he died in 2024, a professor in psychology and behavioral scientist. And he won a Nobel Prize in economics, basically on the premise that he figured out that our decisions are not made by logic and reason, which is what old economics thought. So he demonstrated that, yeah, or his model is that our brain has two parts: system one, system two. System one is fast; it's an unconscious process that works outside of our control, outside of our conscious control, and it uses a lot of shortcuts to formulate decisions. Shortcuts like expensive equals good, right? If I buy something and I don't know anything about it, I could go away and I could research the topic and take months doing so, but I probably don't have the time for that. So maybe the shortcut comes up in the back of my head that, well, expensive equals good, right? If I spend more money on something, I typically get something that's better. So if I spend a little bit more, I'm probably safe. And that's exactly what will happen. You'll probably be safe. It's not always true that things that are more expensive are better. So sometimes that rule is not going to work for you, but most of the time it does. So the rule expensive equals good allows us a shortcut. Other examples of that are, if a lot of other people are doing it, it must be the right thing to do, right? We follow the crowd. And so that's system one. So it's intuitive. On the other side, we have system two. System two is our logical part of the brain, right? This is conscious thought. It takes a lot of energy to run system two, and it operates slowly. And it looks at all the available data and comes up with the best possible decision. So it's more reliable because it doesn't work on rules of thumbs like system one does, but it takes a lot of effort to run. And truth is, Daniel Kahneman calls it the lazy controller. System two doesn't want to engage unless it's forced to. And system two also doesn't run very well if we don't have attention, as in, to have attention for something. And every day we have a limited budget of attention. And our world is so filled with stimuli that it's very hard for us to maintain attention. Our attention span used to be 20 minutes in the 80s. The attention span of the famous goldfish is 9 seconds. Our attention span is now 7 seconds, right? And so Daniel Kahneman figures out back in 2002, he says 90% of our decisions are made by system one, automatically, outside of our conscious control. And system two is quite happy to accept those decisions as long as no alarm bells go off. Later studies say that that's now 95%. And that percentage would continue to be increasing. And that's because our attention span is getting shorter. And so here lies the problem. When we think, how am I going to convince someone, right? I'm writing my book. I'm recommending people to, first of all, to keep reading, to do maybe recommendations that I'm saying in there. How am I going to convince them that they should do that? Well, when you think about how to do that, you're consciously thinking. So you're using system two at that moment. And the problem is that system two tends to come up with the arguments, with the pieces of information that needs system two and the other person to process it. And they don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth for it anymore. And so we actually cause more uncertainty in them. They decide not to decide, right? And
Right.
so what we need, instead of talking to that part of the brain that's arguably in charge of 5% or less of our decisions, we should be talking to the part of the brain that's in charge of 95% of the decisions. And that's basically what the principles of persuasion are. They are decision triggers. And so there's 7 universal principles of persuasion, and we call them universal because they work in all languages, in all cultures, in all countries, which is increasingly more valuable because our cultures are intermixed and it's so much easier to do business with people in other countries. So that's valuable. Then, as I said, there's 7. So I'll run through them real quick. All these words you've heard before, right? And so you run the risk of thinking, oh, yeah, I know how that works. Often people have heard of this before, but when we actually look at their communication, their brochures, their websites, all their communications, they're not using any of it because they don't actually understand it that well, or they don't have the application skill, or even then, they might lack the confidence to actually use it. So, I mean, that could be in any order, but let's say reciprocity. So, reciprocity says that we feel obligated to give back the same type of behavior that was first given to us. Right. And in the context of compliance, in terms of agreeing with you, people tend to say yes to people that they feel they owe something to. And so, especially in business, we've taken that as in, okay, we want to give people stuff so that they want to give things back to us. And that is in essence correct, but a lot of people do it wrong and they basically miss the mark completely. They're investing in something that they think will activate reciprocity and it doesn't do that at all. A good example is the downloadable ebook that you might find on somebody's website, right? Oh, if you're interested in my book, right? Let's say a downloadable chapter that you have of your book, right? Just put your name in, your email address. We'll send you the download link, our gift to you. Nice
Right.
try. That won't activate reciprocity because a gift is something that's given without a requirement needing to be met.
Understood.
And in the case of the downloadable chapter, it was give me your name first and your email address, and then I will send you the download link. Right? It was a reward. It was not a gift at all. And so people don't feel that there's something to reciprocate. Where if you walk into a supermarket and you're presented with that famous tray of cheese or cups of yogurt or pieces of sausage or something, right? Most people accept that, or when they accept that, they think that that does not change their behavior. But the research is very clear. You give things away, average sale goes up. And what I find fascinating is that even if you hate the cheese, doesn't matter. You buy more of something else because it's not about the cheese. It's about, I was nice to you. I gave you something. And now you feel you need to be nice to me in return. So that's reciprocity. So, I mean, we don't have time to dive into everything, but in terms of a book writing, you providing information that can be reciprocated. But of course, your book is all information. So you would have to have a way of articulating it that what you've put in is going beyond where what you would normally do. So there's a way you need to word that to actually get them to, feel that you've gone out of your way to help them. Liking is another principle. So we like to deal with people that we feel like us, which is different from your typical sales training. They say if you want people to buy your book, right, or people to cooperate with you, then you should be likable, which is not wrong, as in that's good if you're likable. But if I get the feeling that you genuinely like me, even if I'm not quite sure about you, if you like me, I'm still safe with you, right? Because if you like me, you're going to look after me. So people like people that like them, who like them and say so. So a genuine compliment, always nice to build that liking. And we like similarities. We like to deal with people that are similar to us. Unity is the last principle that was added by Dr. Cialdini. Unity, often confused with liking, where liking is more about similarities. Unity is about feeling part of the same community, right? And So, just by highlighting that, hey, we're both part of that part of the world that are avid book readers, right? Then you already have a community that you're part of. And by raising that to the surface, people will feel more loyalty to you.
Okay.
Social proof. A lot of people use that in their businesses. They collect testimonials. 98% of online shoppers say that detailed online reviews are an important factor on deciding when and what and where to buy. So that's very important, but social proof, there's a lot more to that than just testimonials. But basically, the rule why it works is that people follow the actions of others, especially when they are numerous, when the others are similar to us, and when we are uncertain. And I was at a conference yesterday, or actually this week, and a great example that seemed to resonate with people. You're hungry, you're walking through the city, you want to go into a restaurant. There's one restaurant that's empty, one restaurant that's half full. Which one do you go into? Well, everybody says, well, I'm not going into the empty one, right? Obviously, these people might know something, right? And that's why they're in that one. Chances are I'll get a good meal if I go to that one. I say, yeah, I agree. So that's your subconscious making that decision, lightning fast, right? You could ring the neighbors and the consumer affairs if they've had any complaints about both those restaurants, right? But you don't do that. You go by the amount of people you see. But now you're walking up to the restaurant, and now it becomes clear to you that everybody inside are, I know, doesn't matter what it is, and certainly no judgment on anybody, but let's say they are all members of the local Mohawk enthusiasts, right? Oh, big spiky colorful hair and tattoos and leather jackets, or they're motorcycle riders like I am, big leather jackets, big boots, helmets on the table, all of them. Do you still feel like you want to go in? Probably less, right? Because the similarity is now out, right? So it was numerous was working for you, but because they weren't similar to you, now the attraction is less. So anyway, we talk about social proof forever. Next principle could be authority. So authority is that we follow the actions of genuine people who genuinely have more knowledge or wisdom on a particular topic. So if you can support what is you're saying by the opinions of other industry experts or even celebrities, then that makes people buy into your message more. Also, when we introduce ourselves, that doesn't tend to work very well. In a book, that's okay, but if you're, let's say, giving a book reading and you're somewhere, or you've got a presentation somewhere, if you go through all the reasons why you're so fantastic, right, the audience is subconsciously is going to go, you're full of yourself, right? And you lose on authority and you lose on liking. So you need to organize for somebody to introduce those credentials before you speak. Then there's the principle of consistency, and you asked which principle do people often get wrong, and I think consistency is the one that people make the most mistakes with. So
Okay.
consistency is that we feel an internal pressure to stay true to past actions and behaviors. And so if we've said something before, that we do something before, if now a decision comes up that's consistent with that, it's harder to say no to that. Let's say you want to take your friend out mountain biking on Sunday or something, and on Friday you go, "Hey, do you think that you're an adventurous type of person?" And they go, "Yeah, of course," because most people do. "Yeah, I'm an adventurous person." "Oh, that's great. On Sunday I'm going mountain biking. You want to come with me?" Right? It's now harder to say no to that because I just sort of put my foot in it, saying, "Well, I'm an adventurous person." But consistency is always about the other person wanting to stay consistent. Consistency is not about us. Yes, it's good that we are consistent, that we say one thing and then follow through, but that's not the psychological trigger that gets people to say yes more often. It's about them. Scarcity then is the last principle. So we are 2.5 times more motivated by a fear of loss than possible gain. So what a lot of people do in their advertising is that they talk about what people stand to benefit, stand to gain if they move in their direction. If you do this, then you will experience this, right? Or if you buy my book, then you will get this and this and this, and you'll be smarter and you'll save money, all these sorts of things. And that's all gain language. where you can rephrase the exact same thing from a loss perspective. If you don't get this book, right, then you will continue to waste money and you'll waste time because you're not doing this the smartest way possible and that sorts of things. And that language is a lot more motivating than gain language. So that's a quick rundown through the 7 principles, Daniela.
There was a lot of information to take in, but I think it's really great that you did go through it all because it allows everyone to get a good understanding of what these principles are. And I mean, they're also displayed, for everyone to see too on their screen and to hear more about within the book itself. So it was a free for review. If you're interested in learning more about one of them, everybody, well, all you have to do is click on the links in the description box of this podcast. We're going to have a link to the book, read more about it. And thank you for answering my questions about which ones are more challenging and which ones people need to value. Because, I mean, there's a lot to think about here. So we need to know which ones to prepare the most for. So I appreciate all that. If people do have more questions about these principles and want to learn more, how can they get in touch with you aside from picking up the book?
Of course, we have a website. It's ethicalpersuasion.com.au because I'm based in Australia. And there's also some free complimentary tools, including a downloadable ebook for which you don't have to surrender your name and your email address. So it's a true gift. And also, I have my own podcast, which started not too long ago, Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. And especially the beginning episodes is a lot of me explaining a lot more details about these principles. Of course, it's not a course, right? This is something you formally need to learn about. And that's something we also do. We run courses and online workshops. And of course, I do keynotes and that sort of stuff. So yeah, those are easy ways to sort of ease your way into it. And once you feel you're getting excited, then just realize that knowledge is great, but knowledge is not necessarily power. You need application skills and confidence, and that comes from doing some formal training. But yeah, if anybody used any of the little tips that we've worked into this episode, I'd love you to leave a comment on on my social media, and I'm sure Daniela as well would appreciate if you put a review on her podcasts, because that seems to be one of the few ways that we can actually hear that our audience is getting what they're liking, what they're wanting from these podcasts. I'm sure Daniela would appreciate that as well.
Of course. Yeah, we'd love that. I appreciate that. So, yeah, guys, we're going to put all the links in the box. Go ahead and click on over and get in the know. But before we wrap up today, Patrick, I'm curious to know. I mean, what is one final thought that you think the audience should hold on to and take with them as they continue on with their day? Some maybe like a small actionable step they can take, to get started.
I've got one, and it's simplicity itself. It's very good. And it has to do with your credibility, or you could say believability. People have a tendency to want to round off numbers,
Okay.
right? You might have, let's say you're an author and you've sold a certain amount of books, right? We tend to say, oh, we sold 120,000 books, right? Or if you're talking about finances, oh, we worked with the client and we managed to save them $45,000. Or we helped 1,200 clients last quarter. When we round off numbers, our audience assumes that, well, you took a liberty in rounding that off, especially claims like 9 out of 10, right? I mean, surely it wasn't exactly that ratio, right? It might have been 84 out of 100 or 92 out of 100. You took a liberty and you rounded off. And I don't know how much liberty you took. And so when you actually use accurate numbers, we helped 1,187 clients last quarter. We sold 43,212 books. Right?
Wow.
It feels like you took it straight out of your accounting software. Right? And so your credibility and your believability for that communication goes up. So quick little tip, stop rounding off.
Yeah, there you go. I love that. Just stop rounding off. Yeah, think about what you actually need to do instead. Perfect. See everybody. I mean, this is a framework, right? So try it, test it, see what happens. Ethical persuasion is important. You got to remove the barriers that prevent people from saying yes to things that benefit them. So I love it. So yeah, again, Patrick, it's been a great conversation. Thank you for walking through all of your principles with us today. And guys, check out the book. It's all going to just benefit you no matter what your area of expertise or your field might be. You can all use these tips. So Thank you for being a part of the Authors on Mission episode. And to our audience, if this episode added value to you, share it and continue learning more. And until next time, keep pushing forward, keep learning, and keep building the influence that you'll turn your mission into reality. We'll see you next time, everybody. That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.